Welcome to the Beyond Pain podcast with your host, Joe Gambino and Joe LaVacca. Join the two Joes, two physical therapists, as they discuss how to navigate the uncertainties of pain so you can move beyond it and get back to the activities you love most. This podcast is for Joe, and their guests to share their clinical thoughts and ideas based on their collective clinical experiences. Can this information be for you? Maybe, but we cannot know for sure. Therefore, it is always worth talking to your healthcare provider to make the best decisions in your care before you implement anything on this podcast. And please use common sense.
Welcome back into the Beyond Pain podcast. I am one of your hosts, Joe Gambino. I'm here with our other host, Joe LaVacca. You can find us both on Instagram at Joe Gambino DPT, for myself at Strength and Motion _PT for LaVacca over there. Podcast is on Instagram at Cups of Joe. No, Beyond Pain podcast and YouTube, Cups of Joe _PT. Damn, I thought I had that smooth. But to answer your question, Joe, as our countdown, so listeners, we have a 5-second countdown as we're about to record. It brings a lot of anticipation. And Joe was asking what should be the song. And to me, it should be Final Countdown.
Well, that's the obvious choice. And
that's the obvious one. So maybe I think we should listen, if you're listening, shoot us a DM, tell us what song we should listen to as our 5-second countdown drops.
Maybe we even need to change the background music on the intro. Maybe the final countdown needs to be in the back or whatever we decide when we're giving our little podcast disclaimer, because that would be kind of fun, right? To have this like anticipatory like orchestra building up and then boom, we're right into the episode. I'm sure a lot of people would like that.
I think so. Okay. Well, listeners, you guys got yourself a job besides leaving us a review and passing this along. As we talked about last episode, we're trying to get over 1,000 listens in the month of February. So if you're not going to share it, just make sure you listen to a couple extra episodes to help boost that up, because we're only like 15 away. So let's go.
Exactly, Joe. Way to appeal to the listeners. There we go. Perfect. Well, if you have been tuning in, Joe asked me a question of the day last week, and I figured it was only fair that I gave him one this week. So, Joe, my question for you is being pain-free possible?
Oh, what a question. I feel like the questions of the day just make us like a guest on our own podcast in a sense. Man, is pain-free possible?
The title of this one will be the Beyond Pain podcast with Joe Gambino.
Yeah, without Joe LaVacca.
Yeah.
Okay. I would say the answer is no to that question. I think that we look at these statistics on pain with low back pain, someone at any point in their life is going to 80% have a chance of having something painful. That's, I think we see these really high numbers across the board with things. So I think that something popping up for you at some point is going to happen and it's inevitable. So being 100% pain-free for an entire life, I don't think there's a such thing. Maybe there is, but I've never come across it. But I do think that, these like natural courses, something pops up, but it goes away quickly, and something that doesn't really like linger around and cause you suffering and like really disrupt your life for a really long period of time. I'm sure there are plenty of people out there that exist like that. And I think there's a lot of people that, even if you've had pain before, can't get yourself to a place where low level pain, not always there. When you do have flare-ups, it's really not that high. Nothing like ever really kind of takes you out of the game, so to speak. And I think those are probably realistic places to live. And I think that's hard for some people to understand, especially if they've had pain for a while. They're always looking for this, like, what they're searching for is like they do this exercise, this program, and then they're like, when they're done with it, they don't feel any symptoms anymore. Even if they went from like a 5 to a 2, like they're like, oh, well, I feel better, but like, why is it still there? Like, well, you are feeling better, and isn't a 2 way better than a 5? And like, if you've had pain for a long time, like, isn't that like pretty sweet? I know for myself with my pain history, like if I don't go, if I have like a 2 level pain, like it's like doesn't even almost register in my brain anymore. Like it's just like there, it doesn't bother me. I could do everything. I'm not worried about it. I can't even remember the last time I've had something, knock on wood, like 6s, 7s, 8s, 9s. Like it's been years since something like that. And like, those are things. And like, now I know I can like trust my body to do almost anything. Right. And sure, I might have a little discomfort afterwards, and I'm able to kind of navigate some of those things. I think that will always be the case for me because I've just had pain for so long in multiple areas for different reasons. Abuse my body, something I'm okay with. And I think that's kind of, we talked acceptance last time, and I've very much accepted that there's going to be some sort of low grade, something that kind of pops up here and there. There are times where I feel like nothing at
Hmm.
all, like not even like stiff. I remember, I think I talked about this on the podcast once. I did like a squat in the parking lot, bringing Olivia to daycare to put her jacket on, and like it just felt like I was just standing, like absolutely nothing, no tension, no nothing, and I was like, "What is this? What is this feeling
What?
that I'm feeling?" So like
Is this just
those are
me?
really, yeah. It's like, am I sitting on a couch right now?
What?
So yeah. So anyway, to go back to your question, because I know I've deviated here, is pain free. I don't think it exists, but I do think it exists where pain is really just something non impactful. And for people who struggle to get there, understand that, I think acceptance is a big key to the puzzle. And I think we even talked last time, like asking the question, like, what are you okay with? Like, are you okay with the ramifications of this? And when I talk to people who've been in pain for a long time, with like, especially if it's like kind of high, and I'm like, well, if you're able to do all this stuff and have like a 1 or 2 level pain, like, are you okay with that? And if they say yes, I'm like, well, okay, well, like I think we need to reframe expectations around that and say, hey, look, why don't we try to get here? If we beat that, great. But if you can live with the 2 level discomfort after you go play
Right.
golf, or after you go do a high rocks competition or run a marathon or do your strength training session, then great. Like, let's get you there first. Let's like make that your new baseline so you're not suffering and you can enjoy things. And then if you can get to a place where you're 100% pain free for however long that is, then great. What was
Right.
your answer to that, Joe?
Well, my answer was obviously no. It is not possible. But that is a really big turning point for people hearing it the first time. And I'm always reminded, I don't know why, of a Family Guy episode when Peter Griffin comes across a genie, and this genie's following him around, waiting for all of his wishes. And Peter gets into some trouble with a man that is much bigger and stronger than him. Then this man says, I'm going to break every bone in your body. And Peter replies, I wish I had no bones. And the genie goes, done. And Peter just falls to a blob of skin and flesh on the floor. So there's consequences to all of these wishes, right? Where in the moment, it seems like a good idea. I want to be pain free. To your point of, are there people who don't feel pain? Yes, there are, right? And this is the thing. There is a condition where people do not feel pain. And when people hear that, they're like, wow, what an amazing thing. No, because their life expectancy is about 20 to 30 years old. They're going to die much earlier than you and I because they don't have a pain protective system. And even if they do live for a long period of time, their quality of life is not great. Imagine stepping on a nail and not knowing it. Imagine building something in your shed and breaking your hand with your hammer and not knowing it. The physiology of all these tissues, swelling, let's even just say lack of blood flow, all of these things are going to start to happen and your tissues are going to die. And you would never know. And these people often never know. And this leads to amputations. This leads to, like we said, early premature death. So pain is not one of those things that we want to wish away. We need it. It is part of our survival process. When you hear it for the first time, as a client this week did, she was really taken off guard. And this was not even from me, it was from another clinician who said, hey, this might be your life. I can't help you. You just might be in pain. And this is, when you frame it like that, that is devastating, right? Instead of saying, hey, what would be the worst thing to happen if this was what you continue to experience after you run, after you deadlift, after you squat, after you insert activity here? And they usually will say, well, I would never be able to run, or I would never be able to lift. I would never be able to do this. I would say, okay, are there other ways for you to be happy? Are there other ways for you to be healthy? Well, of course there are, but I really like to run. I really like to do this. Well, I get that. However, I want to be able to dunk. I'm not 6'5". So I could either continually lament and think about how I was not born 6'5", and instead I'm only 5'10" on a good day, or I can find something that fits my 5'10" frame and find sports and things that I'm good at that better suit me. And the height conversation is always really interesting because weight, we have some control over. Lean muscle mass, we have some control over. Height, we really don't. So your height is your reality and your pain might be your reality. There's some people we know in our worlds that are really happy and positive. That's just their trait. That's just their personality. That's just their characteristics. We have some people who are middle of the road, and then we have some people who we want to avoid at all costs because they are just miserable downers. The point is, if this is your life, what would be the worst thing that would happen? How can I help you build a life that you would find happy and joyful? Because there are so many avenues, right? And I think that's where the rehab approach that I think you and I offer and other people are trying to offer is not to fix pain or fix you to a certain position or that there is an end point. Because that point, if we do find it, would be kind of like hitting a bullseye with your dartboard over and over and over and over and over and over and over again. That's a lot of pressure on you and I to maintain that every day and with every treatment. Instead, it's going to be more realistic that some days, like you said, we'll have a good day. And we talked about this. Other days will be a little off. Other days will be really off. Other days we won't even be able to find the board. But having a plan in place for each day is probably what's going to be the biggest driver long term towards your success. Because we've said it before too, man, like pain is an experience, pain is an emotion. So if you never wanted to feel sad, well, then happiness loses its value. If you didn't have grief, you wouldn't be able to move on from loss. So these negative emotions, as much as we don't like to experience them, are a necessary part of who we are. And I don't think pain is any different.
Yeah, no, I really like that. I think it's well said. And I think there's two ways I think people think about this, like why it may be like a problem or like a burden. I think when people just like don't ever think that they should have pain and there's something wrong, like why me in a sense. The other one there's like a concern of the future. Like if I'm like
Yeah,
this now, like what happens 10, 20,
sure.
15, 50 years from now, depending on age, right? What is going to happen to me if it's like this now? It's going to get worse when I'm older because I think the mindset that a lot of us have is like as we age, we're going to be weaker. We're going to be, less explosive. We're going to become frail. Like that's kind of like the mindset. I actually hear people say this a lot. Like, oh, I don't want to be frail when I'm older. I want to be able to do things. My pain is going to get worse. My mobility is going to get worse. My strength is going to get worse. And I think that's kind of like where people kind of live in their mind, and that becomes the problem. So if you have someone and I'm turning this on you, Joe, someone where like that's their frame of reference, like it's like the future. How are you
Yeah.
having conversations with them around this?
Well, it's the same thing as everything else, right? I mean, if you had a day where you were happy, it was a really great day. Did you go to bed thinking that I have to be happy again like I did today? Everything has to go exactly like it did today for tomorrow to be successful? If you went to bed sad or you had a bad day, did you again extrapolate that to I'm going to have bad days for the rest of my life? And that's your relationship, that's your work. And that's where I think a lot of those examples can be very powerful. And
Mhm.
that's why that whole psychosocial framework of helping people in pain, it's not woo woo. It's to really, I think, tap into the people's strengths and what they're already doing to help themselves. So if you know that your relationship or your argument with your wife did not mean you were going to get divorced the next day. Or every time you had a disagreement with your child, you were going to bring them into foster care, right? If those relationships can mend and go through ups and downs, why can't the relationship you have with your body mend as it goes through ups and downs? So I don't know, and I tell this people very frankly, I don't know if what we will offer you will get you to a lower level of pain. What I have backing me is research and science and my clinical experience and blah, blah, blah. But I know it's not going to work for everyone. Some people will come in and they'll feel great, and some people won't. And I think what we were mentioning with progress before or in last week's podcast, right? Yeah, everything's kind of like nonlinear. But if you are getting stronger, if you are lifting more, if you are running faster, if you are running longer, well, then your anatomical muscle tendon unit, musculoskeletal system is adapting, and it is adapting in a positive way. So we know you can adapt to stress. If your pain is exactly the same, well, there's no reason for us to stop all these things. However, we might now want to look at the bigger picture and say, well, where else can you go, or where else can I help you go to reframe this experience? Because it does not seem like there's anything wrong with you, quote unquote, right? Big picture standpoint. And how do we know that? Well, because when you came in with your 5 out of 10 pain or 7 out of 10 pain in your knee, you can only run a mile. Now you have a 5 or 7 out of 10 pain in your knee, but you're able to run 10 miles, right? Your back pain with deadlifting, it would come on at 100 pounds. Now it comes on at 200 pounds or 300 pounds, right? There will always be a glass ceiling, right? And I think the pain-free conversation, it always reminds me of perfect is the enemy of good, right? When you are getting better, and if you have that mindset of, I need to be zero pain for me to be successful, that's perfection. How often do our lives go perfectly? How often does anything that we want, even when we practice it, go absolutely perfectly? Right? I mean, for as much as you and I can prepare for the podcast and I can know what I want to say, I can stumble over a word. And I've talked, as you know, endlessly for the last 15 years, 16 years of being a professional. I can still bite my tongue when I'm eating. I've been fucking eating since I was 1 year old and I can still make mistakes, but I don't give up whenever I bite my cheek. And I'm like, oh man, if I can't not bite my cheek or my tongue
My daughter
this late in the
tries to,
game,
but yeah.
I might as well just stop eating, right? I tripped over a word at the podcast. I should probably just not host the podcast anymore with Joe. What an embarrassment. So same idea, like when you have these ups and downs, if you're not walking away from everything else in your life every time you make a mistake or you have a bad day, why should this be any different?
Yeah, I like that. A couple of things you said, I think listeners should kind of take away. It's like this remembrance that pain is a protective mechanism, right? It's not something here to like haunt us and just like cause us problems because someone decided to make it that way. It has a purpose, and unfortunately, sometimes those responses can be elevated for certain people. And sometimes that's genetic, sometimes that's learned, sometimes like we don't even know why. And then the other thing I really like that we were talking about here is this like concept of looking at not just the pain, but what can you do? And I think that's a great lens for listeners to look through. It's like not just like how much pain am I having, but what can you do? Because I also think like if like, obviously if you have really high levels of pain, like 6 and above, like that's enough to like make your like mood come down and things like that. That's tough to navigate. So I'm gonna like take those people out, maybe like out of this bucket. But if you have like lower level pain, like 2s, 3s, and 4s, where you don't really need medication, it comes and goes. It's nothing that's going to like disrupt your life. If you're able to, and I think this is important, like if you can get yourself into this lens and get over that hump where you can do more, the person who can go from 100 pounds to a 200-pound deadlift or go from running no more than 10 minutes to being able to run a marathon. I think you like those people who can get there, get more out of life, even though they have pain, because they can do things. They feel fun. They feel more productive. It's not going to be such like a burden on your mindset. Well, obviously if you have high pain or you feel like you can't get over that hurdle, and then you're always wondering. And I think the doubt is probably like the biggest thing. Like, is this going to get worse? Am I doing something wrong? Like that holds people back, that weighs on your mind. I think that also like enhances the pain response, right? Keeps people from like getting the most out of their life. And I think that's when pain probably becomes more problematic than just having this low level pain, because now it's something that's affecting their mental status, right? It's starting to become, it's breathing out right into their lifestyle, into the way they think, the way they perceive things. And once it starts to, I think, hold people back from doing things is when pain, regardless of the number, really becomes impactful and important for people to start to try to work through.
Absolutely, man. Well, I think that, thanks for answering my question. Do you have any other thoughts or anything about pain-free?
No, I do. I don't. I think the biggest thing, if you're listening, is try to flip your brain from pain is okay, which I think we've tried to talk about in every episode of this podcast, and this idea of what can you do versus what can't you do. I know that's a very hard concept for a lot of people to think about. I'm a very optimist, very opposite from Joe over here. I can always see the glass is half full. Joe is the opposite. His glass is even if it's half full, it's fully empty.
Fully empty.
But I think that's the kind of framing that is very helpful for people when they're struggling with pain.
Absolutely. Well, Joe, I love you. Listeners, we love you. And if you want to fill my cup, like, subscribe, share this with somebody who could benefit. And don't forget to come back next week for another exciting episode of the Beyond Pain podcast.